welcome to the June Public Protocol Community Meeting. I'm Josh with DevRel. Today, we are going to be discussing reduction of gas prices. And yeah, we got a couple panelists that are joining us today. As always, you have Bowen from the protocol, from the core team. Yeah, if you want to do a quick intro, Bowen, and then we'll go to Marcelo and Marco.
Yeah, so I'm Bowen, running protocol research and development at Pagoda. And yeah, nice to see you guys again.
Marcelo?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, guys.
Oh yeah, no problem. Just like a quick intro, just like we are.
Yes, I'm Marcelo. I'm a software engineer at Aurora. I'm currently leading the protocol team. We are very happy about everything about NIR and Aurora, how it's going on. So hopefully we can move these discussions. Mark?
Cool, awesome. And Marco?
Hi, I'm the co-founder of Tonic Dex. We're building on NIR protocol. I'm not part of the core NIR team, but I wrote this initial proposal to reduce the gas floor price.
Cool, awesome. Glad to have you on. Yeah, so we'll go ahead. We'll do presentation from Bowen, go through a couple of slides. If at any time you have any question at all, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And yeah, we'll either answer them as they come if they're relevant, or we'll wait till the AMA at the end and answer your question. But yeah, feel free to shoot off and fire off any questions, comments that you have while we're doing the presentation. And with that, yeah, I'll turn over to Bowen.
Okay, yeah, let's get started. So agenda for today. Yeah, I'll still provide updates on the protocol, on the recent development as well as sharding. And then we actually have two discussions today. I invited Marco to talk about his proposal to reduce the minimum gas price on NIR, and also invited the Aurora team to discuss their proposal on cross-contract costs between Aurora and other contracts on NIR. Okay, so let me give a quick update. So the 1.27 release is going to be live on mainnet in 2 weeks. So we did some refactoring of the client actor, which is an important part of the overall NIR core code, to be more parallelizable, and hopefully that would improve the speed as well as stability of the blockchain node. And also we had a lot more observability instrumentations, both in the form of metrics as well as in the form of logging. So that would also provide us more insight into what went wrong when things do go wrong. And then we actually fixed a critical vulnerability in contract runtime. This is already released, so I can talk about it publicly. It was released as a patch in 1.26.1, and then we also obviously reported the release in 1.27.0. I actually tweeted about it. It was a vulnerability that where, like, if a smart contract export is import, then it will cause the entire network to crash. And there is a nice post on the NIR core discussion page where Simonas summarizes the problem as well as how we fixed it. And finally, there's some network improvements. We're switching the serialization on the network layer from Borsch to protobuf. It's mostly just doing that for the reason for the extensibility. The core of the message is still serializing Borsch. It's just that there's like a protobuf wrapper around it so that we can extend things and change things more easily. Okay, so that's what's upcoming. And I also want to give an update on sharding. I know that a lot of people have questions around this, and I know that we have been talking about this for a while, but it is finally coming. We're going to run Stake Wars, which if people have been in the ecosystem for a while, probably have seen this before. This will be the third time, I think, that we will run Stake Wars, which is incentivized testnet to attract more validators to join. That will start around mid-July. And that is to prepare for the phase 1 of sharding launch in September, where we would introduce this new type of validator called chunk-only producers. And hopefully that would bring the number of validator on NIR to 200 or 300. And whereas today we only have 100 validators on the network. And yeah, if you're interested, you can still sign up right now at near.org/decentralized. And we will have more information published in the upcoming weeks on how exactly the program is going to run and how you could participate and so on. Yeah, so that's all the update I have right now. So before I go into discussions, is there any questions? Okay, looks like there's no questions. Yeah, then I guess we can proceed to the discussion. So yeah, I'll let Marco talk about his proposal to lower the minimum gas price on Near.
Thanks, Bowen. So I posted this in the Near governance forum and wrote an NEP for it, but just to give a high level summary, the proposal is to reduce the minimum amount of gas you have to pay for, or the minimum Near price you pay for gas at the moment. Right now on the Near network, if you go on explorer.near.org, you can see that the minimum price.
Sorry to interrupt, Marco. Do you want to present? I can stop sharing and you can present. If you want to present anything, I mean, it's okay if you don't want to present.
No, I don't have slides.
Okay.
Since everything's already written on the governance proposal, so figured we would kind of verbally talk through it here. But the current gas price is 0.0001 Near per TGAS. So the issue here is that the network utilization isn't that high. So on average, there's only maybe like 10 transactions a second. A lot of that's Aurora. Each shard can support well over that. So we're a network like very under capacity, but we have a minimum price on gas, right? So, in theory, equilibrium price, if you had a totally free, free market would be near zero, right? Because there's plenty of block space. But with this floor, you still have to pay a minimum amount. That's not necessarily a problem for most applications because in practice that comes out, pretty cheaply. Like for instance, fungible token transfer right now is probably a little over half a cent. And then, a swap on refinance, if you already have a balance, is probably a bit over a cent. Like these aren't huge amounts. The issue here is that, and like for certain applications like NFTs or DAOs, like those aren't as price sensitive or transaction heavy. So that's like perfectly acceptable. But when you start getting into DeFi, I think that's where even fractions of a cent make a difference. For instance, we're an order book DEX on Near. As of today, there's 2 others as well. This requires active liquidity provision. So even things that would be free in like a centralized environment would not be free in like when building on Near. For instance, quoting prices or canceling your orders. So whenever these basic operations cost money, you're sort of offloading the cost to users by having this minimum gas price. Because if it costs you money to quote a price, you'll quote less frequently or you'll quote a wider spread to reduce the risk. The same thing applies for AMMs too. If there's very small arbitrage opportunities, this gas price can make it cost prohibitive to close the smallest ones. So in a sense, like even though it might not look like a very high price to users at the at its surface, you're offloading the cost by decreased market efficiency for every DeFi application, because most DeFi applications or like markets in general require people to actively either provide liquidity or find arbitrage opportunities and close them. So when you slow that down, you're paying the price with like less efficient pricing on pretty much any asset on Near.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah. To summarize what Marco said, I think I probably have a slide here. So right now the current minimum gas price is this amount, and the network utilization, as Marco said, is pretty low. And the fees are quite expensive. I mean, they are cheap, but they're expensive if you have to send a lot of transactions. In cases like, if you want to do on-chain DEX, or like even especially other book-based one, like what Tonic is doing. or even in cases of Aurora where like they're just like sending a lot of transactions. So that would kind of accumulate and then become expensive for people. So yeah, that's kind of the overall idea. And yeah, I want to see if I think this was actually already discussed on the forum, as well as I think Marco also submitted the pull request on the NAP repository. So I just want to see if there are people with different opinions or anyone in the audience who want to maybe chime in and offer their idea on this.
Yeah, we only have one question right now. It's asking if we can eventually move to a gasless chain, like what Aurora Plus is currently doing.
That's a great question. I think that basically there are two parts, right? So I don't think moving to Aurora Plus means gasless, or at least in the sense that it doesn't mean that everything's free, because yes, with Aurora Plus you get some free transactions, but once you go above that limit, you still have to pay. And if the question is more about whether we can adopt that model, actually yes, that is something I've been thinking about. It's just that right now on Near there's no way to do meta transactions. And in order to get to that stage, we first need to introduce some capability like that. But yeah, maybe I don't fully understand what you mean by gasless. Like if you're talking about like a blockchain with no gas price, then I think that will become problematic, because then people can easily spam the entire network and actually prevent other people from using it. Yeah, actually, we have the Aurora team here. Anyone from the Aurora team wants to?
Oh, one comment I can make in this regard is that this model from Aurora is pretty nice. As Matthias is pointing in the chat, you are nonetheless paying the gas in some other way, right? So if we want to provide this from the Near side, probably we will need some sort of meta transaction, right?
Yep.
That's what it will take to have this on the Near side. And then it will be up to the provider to just provide you with Near free transactions.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, if anybody has any other questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A at the bottom or in chat. We'll monitor both those areas. Yeah, let us know.
So Bowen, I in the discussion at the very end, I think one point I wanted to bring up was the latest comment, where I think someone mentioned like that the network currently relies on a solid gas floor price more than like we've acknowledged. I haven't worked on the core Near implementation really, so I can't say as to like, I like from a high level economic perspective, I think the case for this reducing the gas floor price is strong, but if the implementation details or things were missing that would make it impractical in the short term.
I don't think. So are you referring to comment from Jacob?
Yes.
Let me. I'm not seeing where it's related to the current implementation. Is Jacob right now here? Can we invite Jacob to talk about his? It seems like Jacob is in the meeting.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and promote Jacob to a panelist. Hey, Jacob, are you able to chat with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you great.
Okay, that's good. Yes, so I've written this message just kind of to give a counterpoint of like maybe from a user perspective, yes, we want to increase it, but from a validator perspective, maybe there are reasons why we don't want to do it. And there's a couple of points, and I don't think I can repeat everything right now that I've written there, but I do think there is a good reason why we need a gas floor price, and mainly it's because I don't think dynamic gas pricing works well for us. If we look into the future with dynamic sharding, the way we handle increasing workload is not by increasing the price, but by adding more shards. So ideally, we're always like right around the gas floor price. And if that's too low, then we have a fundamentally broken chain that just financially doesn't have the balance sheet that it needs. Right now, we don't have dynamic sharding. So we maybe need some way to kind of adjust dynamically to higher workload. And that can be by increasing the price. That might be more important right now. And I still think it doesn't really work right now because that is probably the part that is implementation related. Right now, when you send the transaction to the near blockchain, you decide the number of gas units you're willing to burn, not the number of tokens you're willing to burn. So at the moment when you send it, you have to kind of, before you send, you have to check what is the current gas price and think how much could this gas price be increased before my transaction gets accepted and executed. Am I willing to pay that price? And my suspicion is that nobody does that. Everyone is just kind of like sending however they want. So if there is more load than the system can handle, I think the people will not actually stop sending transactions immediately because it's not set up that way right now. And that's a bit of a concern for me personally. It's like, should we decrease the price and saying like, yeah, the dynamic price will kind of work out fine? I haven't seen anything yet that we actually have dynamic pricing working. So that's my main concern.
Yeah, I think, okay. Yeah, I think I can answer both concerns. So for your first concern, I don't think it actually makes sense to think of, blockchain as like as a company where the goal is to make money, right? Like we should think more about Near as like a common good, like a common infrastructure for people to use. And in that regard, the goal isn't necessarily for like the infrastructure to make money on its own. And the reason why we have gas price is more to basically be like a Sybil resistance mechanism and to prevent someone from cheaply spamming the network so that others won't be able to use it. And I think in that regard, I mean, I saw your comment about like this inflow versus outflow. I mean, I don't think that's the best way to think about it, because you can like I tend to think more that the inflation is just part of how the system works, and it isn't necessary to say that the goal, at least in the short term, is for there to be no inflation. And I mean, sure, eventually maybe we'll get into a state where there's a lot more shards and then a lot more usage, and then we would enter a deflationary state. But I don't think that will happen. I don't think that is the intention, at least today. Now to answer your second question, I think we should decouple this from what can be done on the protocol level versus what can be done on the tuning level. Sure, like I see your point that people might not be able to react to the gas price change, but I don't think that is like a argument for not changing the gas price, right? Because like even today, you still can't have that dynamic gas price change, and people can still go into trouble if they don't check gas price. I think that's just something we probably need to address on the tooling level, so that developers and everyone who's using Near and in the wallet whatever have that information available for people to see. And I think that is more like a separate concern from how the gas price is defined on the protocol level.
I agree with the statement there. I think with like the users not being able to respond to gas pricing, because that's absolutely true for someone just using the near web wallet, but a large percentage of transactions are automated transactions from sophisticated players. Like if you look at Ref Finance today, you query the transactions, about half of them come from the top 3 users, which are bots. So I think, yes, like while the retail user may not be able to like very easily adjust their spend, their demand is like a little less elastic versus someone like market makers or people running arbitrage bots or other kinds of heavily automated activities.
Yeah, I mean, these are fair points. I'm not saying we cannot move ahead at all. I just wanted to kind of add to the discussion that right now, gas floor price is not completely useless as it might have seemed.
Yeah, I don't think it's completely useless. Basically, if let's say we don't have this floor price, then as I said, it would actually be quite problematic, because then like people can actually cheaply spam the network, stop others from using them. We actually have done a drill like where we actually exercise the scenario. What happens when people can infinitely spam the network, and basically it's like everyone who actually want to use it would have to wait like 10 minutes for the transaction to get processed, which is far from ideal.
There's also, I was just going to say, there's also a comment from Ilya
Yep.
saying that more to add on the protocol economics side, that the reality of token economics is that locking near in the financial applications has a way larger impact on reducing supply than spend on transaction fees. Yep. And generally going to price fees will be important to improve the usability.
No, I think what Ilya meant is dollar price fees, like basically having gas price in US dollars versus in near. Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I mean, until crypto flips fiat, yes, that is definitely the case. Yeah, and I do think part of the reason why near gas price seems high is because the near token price itself, the change in near token price over the past year, like when near first launched, it's in US dollar terms is much cheaper than what it is today.
Yeah, I think another key point when I wrote the proposal was the fact that, yeah, when near price doubles, and it's a volatile asset, right? This can happen on a regular basis. Your cost for a transaction doubles despite demand for block space or computation being flat, right? So this is kind of a way of blunting that. I think it's a fair point to say, should it be, one, I proposed dividing it by 10. Maybe the decrease doesn't need to be that large. I think there's pretty much, there's probably diminishing benefits the further and further you decrease it. It's kind of hard to truly price or decide a rational price. But I think to Jacob's point, it's like some function of utilization. I think if we're in the low single-digit percentage, depending on what you think the near network can handle at the moment, like there's room to maneuver to where like you still rely on a gas floor price, but it should be like I guess you should find some target utilization on each shard that would work, because I think most it's not like Ethereum with a more dynamic fee market, but I think we can agree that with utilization at under 5%, probably even less, we could easily cut it without causing probably like too much of a problem, whether it's half or 3/4. Like we can pick a number that would work.
Yeah, and also I think since we have another discussion, I think I kind of want to wrap up the discussion here. So I just want to say that everything we say right now about the long term is basically established on the premise that near will become successful in the long term, right? If if near is always at 5% utilization rate, I don't think that's what we want. And if we can do something right now that maybe it's not perfect, but it can help the network grow and gain more usage, so that we can be successful in the long term, I think that is something worth doing. And yeah, I want to thank Marco for the proposal as well as the implementation. I think the implementation is actually mostly ready. And yeah, thanks a lot, Marco, for the presentation here. And yeah, anyone has a question on this topic? If not, we can move on to the next discussion.
Yeah, I don't see any questions yet, but yeah, if anybody thinks of any, please feel free to, again, drop them either in the chat or the Q&A box at the below.
And thanks for having me. Thanks for your input, Bowen and Jacob as well.
Yeah, thanks, Marco.
Okay, maybe I think we can potentially move on to the next topic, which I think will require more discussion. And yeah, Marcelo, do you want to just start the discussion? I don't know whether you want to present something or because this is a quite complex topic.
Yes, I can present the very same EIP we wrote. Let me try to do it. Let me post the link first. So this is the link to the discussion, and I will be presenting this EIP. First of all, for starting here, mentioning that this is like what we want to do in Aurora. It's allowing developers, users, of course, to make cross-contract calls from smart contracts inside Aurora to near smart contracts. Just a little bit of why this is possible. It's because Aurora is in itself uses smart contract on top of near. You usually interact with a lot of infrastructure outside of the system, but the core of Aurora it's uses smart contract. So that's doable, but it's not allowed today. It requires the Aurora contract provide this interface. It has some security risks associated with it. That's why it have not been done so far. So let me present my screen and share two main approaches that we want. Okay, I need permission to share my screen. Is this something you can give me quickly? Otherwise, I can share a link with you.
Try now.
Give me a second. Okay, I think this will work now. Okay. It's the cross-contract call, yeah. Okay, so this is a link to where we're having the discussion. It's in the Aurora forum, but the proposal itself you can find it on on EIPs, Aurora improvement proposals. So let me quickly go through this proposal. Well, not quickly, but let me go through this proposal, and then I will mention one other alternative that we were considering. Okay, so just to recap, the main goal is to provide native cross-contract call for Aurora contracts so that we can have interoperability between Aurora and near. One thing that I want to mention is that Aurora contract provides this synchronous environment similar to what you have on Ethereum today. Of course, when we introduce this, like whichever contract uses cross-contract calls would be exposed to the near asynchronous environment, right? So that we're not going to avoid it. So I think this diagram here should be good. Can you see it? Fine.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So basically, let me introduce which are the components of the system, and then I will go through the workflow. We will have a user that will trigger the cross-contract call. We will have a user that will interact with some contract in Aurora. The user will interact with this contract that we're calling it source Aurora. And in the end, what we want to happen is that if some conditions apply, we're going to make a cross-contract call to target near. Target near is uses smart contract on near side, right? So how this will work is that we will allow this to be executed in 2 transactions, but it could be packed in a single near transaction. The main idea is that the user will initiate a transaction to Aurora. You notice that this is a near transaction, but we can call it an Aurora transaction since it's like
sorry to interrupt, Marcelo. I think I just want to clarify this also for the audience. So when you say source Aurora, you mean the Aurora contract as it is deployed on near today, right?
No, I mean, yeah, that's a fair question. Well, it could be seen as the Aurora contract, but in particular inside the Aurora, in the near Aurora contract, the particular contract inside of Aurora. So
okay. So it's like a Solidity contract you're talking about here.
Exactly. Let's call it that way. The Solidity contract inside of Aurora. Anyway, from the near perspective, this would be a call to Aurora, right? So from the near perspective, it's a call to Aurora. Within the Aurora framework, this is a call to a particular Solidity contract, right? So the user will initiate a transaction. Can you actually see my pointer, Bowen? Just to know.
Yep.
Perfect. So the user will initiate a transaction, and eventually, again, some conditions apply. The transaction will call this special contract inside of Aurora. This is also a Solidity contract. This is still in the Aurora context. We'll call the function schedule with all relevant arguments. We are not going into the details about which are the arguments, but let's assume we pass here all the relevant arguments for making the promise, and they will be stored. They will be stored on this contract, and then the transaction will proceed. So no promise will be executed at that point. And then in a separate transaction, and by this I mean in a separate near transaction, you will call, like the same user will need to call async Aurora, which is a contract on near protocol, like it's a smart contract on near, that will execute the scheduled transaction. It will basically go back to our router, will pull the payload, and will execute the promise later when it receives the payload.
Sorry to interrupt. What is the nature of Aurora router? Is it a Solidity smart contract within Aurora, or is it a? It does sound to me like it's a Solidity contract within Aurora.
It is indeed, yeah. All the first interaction happen within Aurora. It's a single near transaction with no promises or no cross-contract calls. Yeah, Aurora router, it's a Solidity smart contract inside of Aurora. Yeah.
I guess then my question is, why are source Aurora and Aurora router 2 different smart contracts?
Because source Aurora, it's just an application. Let's say you are interacting with 3 Solaris and you want to swap between some tokens in Aurora and near, and then you, like source Aurora will be 3 Solaris in this case. It's a custom function. Yeah, source Aurora is not implemented by us. It's implemented by developers. It's like Aurora router.
Okay, I see. I think that's where it's I thought source Aurora is also like a sync provided by Aurora, is like a common infrastructure.
It's a good feedback. I will probably try to change this naming, but mainly the idea is that we have a source contract and a target contract, and we want to make a cross-contract call between source and target. That's the rationale of this naming. But good feedback that it could be updated. Yeah, and Aurora router, it's a contract also inside Aurora, right? So keeping with the explanation of this design is that, okay, you will be able to call async Aurora, and async Aurora will pull this payload and will execute the callback. When executing this promise, like async Aurora will be able to execute everything that it receives from Aurora router. It should be good to go. Okay, so let me.
Sorry, Marcelo. I think I didn't understand the second part. So async Aurora is a contract on Near, right?
Correct.
And how does it pull payload from Aurora router? Is it like a cross-contract call it does to pull the payload, or?
Yeah, it's a cross-contract call. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the dashed lines are cross-contract calls.
Ah, okay.
This
It
is a
pulls
cross-contract
payload.
call.
Okay.
This dashed line here, the second one is probably some notation abuse. It's like the callback, right? In some sense, it's a cross-contract call, but it's just a promise that was it's a callback that was attached in the beginning of the async Aurora.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the third dashed line, it's that when you receive, like on the callback, when you receive the payload, the promised payload, you will execute the actual call, the actual cross-contract call. Only at that moment in time. Does it make sense now?
Yeah, it makes sense. It just feels to me that there's some overhead that may be expensive here. Like you're doing like multiple like cross-contract calls just to pass the context around.
So here's the thing. Let me go through the rationale about why we need async Aurora. The main point is that we don't want to have arbitrary cross-contract calls started from Aurora directly, because Aurora contract, like on Near, usually you do authentication by verifying which is the predecessor account ID, right? So basically, Aurora contract has, let's say, admin privilege maybe over itself, and in particular, maybe that can be addressed, but in particular, it has a lot of tokens associated, like all tokens that are locked through the bridge, like from Near to Aurora, they are like on the fungible token contract and NEP 141, they belong to Aurora contract, right? So if you send, I don't know, USN from Near to Aurora contract, they will, like from the Near point of view, those USN will belong to the Aurora contract, and then you will be the owner, like some 0x address will be the owner inside of Aurora. But basically, we allow arbitrary cross-contract call from Aurora, anyone could potentially steal those funds, right? By calling from Aurora, by calling the USM smart contract. And like in general, this is some particular scenario. It could also be like handled case by case, but we would love to just avoid having this complexity inside of the contract, like having this potential security hole inside of the contract, like we are allowing everyone to make arbitrary cross-contract calls from Aurora. That's something we don't want. Like that's something you usually don't want in your contracts. Mostly you don't want in Aurora, which is a whole ecosystem, right? Which it holds like a lot of stuff. Like it's not possible, but suppose that it would be possible somehow to trigger some, I don't know, upgrade of the contract by calling itself somehow, right? That's the type of stuff that we need to avoid at all costs. So that's why we want to have async Aurora. But we need async Aurora. Basically, we will be able to call async Aurora from any other contract, but async Aurora will be a contract with no privileges. It will like.
Yeah, I understand. Basically, the whole purpose is to pass through the call.
Yeah, we want to hide all the complexity of starting from Aurora completely in the design, rather than analyzing case by case in the code, where it's easy to miss some stuff, right?
Evgeny Kapun is asked to speak on this topic real quick. But before that, there was a earlier question just to clarify from someone. They asked Aurora source, so Aurora source, router, and native all live within the Aurora account on mainnet. Is that correct?
Aurora source and Aurora router, yes, they are both Solidity contracts inside of Aurora. And async Aurora, it's a Near contract, the same as target Near. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. And then, Evgeny, go ahead. You should be able to speak.
Okay, so what I want to say regarding this authentication parts, Marcelo is right that we don't want arbitrary cross-contract calls from Aurora Near contract. But another issue that we need to think about is that the same near contract Aurora represents multiple contracts within Aurora. And so the target near account needs a way to authenticate a specific contract within Aurora. So I don't see how the current design handles this. So basically, if it just checks predecessor account ID in near, it will see that it's, yeah, so it has address of the message. So basically the call from async Aurora to the target contract, it shouldn't be just arbitrary call where the source Aurora contract supplies completely arbitrary function name and message, because in this case the target near contract will not be able to authenticate the specific source Aurora contract. So probably there should be some call with a specific signature which will include the address of a source contract so that the target contract would be able to trust it. And then there will be probably, so it will be not arbitrary function call, it will be probably a specific function like call from Aurora, and this function will have an argument that is the contract, the address, the predecessor ID essentially within Aurora, and then some payload. And then if it's a specific function, it can be called directly from Aurora contract because it's a specific function, so it will not be confused, for example, with the API of fungible tokens. It will be a different function name. And it will not be confused with any other things that Aurora contract can call. It will be basically a special function that will be only used for this purpose.
Yeah, that's definitely possible, right? That we, like as part of the standard, rather than doing this, we only allow to make calls to specific functions that we create, like this standard. It's not very different than what we have today, but it would remove part of the back and forth. I want to highlight one thing. Is that in this approach that allows two transactions, it allows to, one of the good things that I didn't mention is that all this approach, it could be executed in a single near transaction, albeit it will be a little bit more expensive, right, than if you would do two transactions. But the process will be mostly the same, but it will be initiated in async Aurora. The second thing on this regard is that it will allow users to make two different transactions, right? It will allow the user to split their transactions over two transactions when they want to make a cross-contract call outside of the system. That could have its own benefits in some use cases. So, well, in some sense, you get best of both worlds. But I do like this alternative that you are mentioning about a specific method on other contracts. That's something we didn't evaluate. But that's also another alternative that would decrease the complexity, right? Because if this is a special method that won't allow running special code, that should be fine. Like, yeah.
Well, I also want to suggest an alternative, which is like the problem is that you want when, like, let's say I have a Trisolaris contract that wants to call outside into near account, like the near contract needs to ideally somehow being able to identify that this is a Trisolaris, right? And so the one way to do this is for Aurora account itself to serve as a factory for this kind of proxy accounts for each EVM address. So you can actually have EVM address.aurora, which is a proxy for all the outgoing messages that EVM address wants to send. And so this way in near, it will be Trisolaris' address.aurora account that will be interacting with near accounts. So pretty much, and so your Aurora is just like, your Aurora contract just needs to route the message to the respective EVM proxy, like let's say Trisolaris.aurora, and then that one will actually interact with near and then call back Aurora with the response.
But with this approach, will that require deploying a new contract every time for every new address that makes a cross-contract call?
Yeah, so this will require the having.
I think this is a great idea, except that it's going to be expensive, right? Like it'd be great if you can use that proxy without having to deploy a contract on the.
Yes. So this is where the delegate keys proposal and account extensions coming, right? Because the idea there is like we need this pattern a lot. Like there's MetaMask support that needs this and a lot of other things. And so then we can actually optimize, like because it's going to be the same contract deployed many times, we can actually not charge for it as often.
Yeah. You want like a module you can import.
Yeah, well, that like you can actually today deploy, run, execute the transaction, and maybe remove the deployment, like delete the contract. You probably don't win anything by deleting the contract, but yeah.
I mean, that proxy contract right now, like the minimal size was like 8 kilobytes, I think, or something. So it's not. And then, I mean, you can actually force the contracts that actually call out to pay, because it's not going to be users. Like it's not going to be from user space. It's going to be from contract space anyway. So if they want to call out, they just need to, pay a little bit from there. I mean, and like long term, we should just, allow same contract to be used without extra payment.
Yeah, well, that approach that actually will allow even to.
Yeah, actually, I think that is actually abusable, right? Because then users can abuse it by like trying to call a lot of different contracts, and then like it just like drains the balance of the whoever is paying for that, and it just like create a lot of like those proxies, and like it seems like an attack vector to me.
No, because only the contract itself will be able to call these subcontracts, right? So you as a user won't be able to trigger this call from another contract. So Aurora will be the only one to be able to tell Trisolaris at Aurora to make a call. And Aurora will have the logic that prevents other users to do it. It will only allow Trisolaris to do it.
Okay.
I mean, Kirill points out that it adds maintenance burden, which is true, but I mean, it sounded like you have like source Aurora router, which is also maintenance burden, and also like by splitting transactions, actually makes it super complicated. This is actually possible in a single transaction up to a gas limit.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be much better if it can be done in like a single transaction. And it'd be definitely much better user experience for like Aurora users.
We didn't consider this suggestion by Evgeny. I just listened to it just now, and I think it's a good suggestion that addressed both parts, right? It's kind of secure from the Aurora standpoint. We just don't want it to allow like arbitrary cross-contract call. In the very beginning, when we were not thinking about authentication, we were thinking about allowing arbitrary function calls on methods. But anyway that we are right now providing authentication, this means that the target near needs to support in some way the current standard. So if we are already forcing the target contract to support some standard, we might as well enforce to implement a particular function, and that should be enough. Yeah. I think this is.
Yeah, but I mean, requiring near contracts to support like receiving messages for Aurora seems pretty heavy.
Yep.
Well, you don't need it, right? You can, like, for example, if I'm a developer, somehow I'm interacting with Refinance, I can, like, Refinance doesn't need to know about this. we can deploy, like the developer can deploy another contract that implements this interface and interacts through this proxy to refinance, right? That's also possible.
But that is more
Um,
heavy for the developer, right? Like,
well, that's pretty much you pushing the thing I described to a developer, right?
Yeah,
Without
yeah.
doing the
Yes, exactly. I mean,
but there's also security issues now on the developer side they need to deal with around like the asset ownership and stuff like this. Because like here's an example, right? I'm Trisolaris. I want to do a trade on Refinance, right? My assets are actually on Aurora account. Like they're actually on Aurora account. So I need to be able to pull them out of Aurora account and then trade it on Refinance and put them back into Aurora account, like in near system, and then make the updates on my side, right? And so it needs to actually work in sync with on token receival inside Aurora contracts, because that's what's going to happen when like I trade on Refinance. And so if you're pushing it on completely on developer side to figure all this out, like I don't even know if they can. Like you need to actually have Aurora contract to manage on token, like all the near callback stuff needs to be managed on that side.
Oh, but the callback will not be managed by the Aurora contract, will be managed by the proxy contract, right?
So that's what I'm saying, like that doesn't work, because then Trisolaris doesn't actually have this money. So again, like let's say Trisolaris wants to do a trade on Refinance, they need to actually withdraw funds from Aurora account and then put the new funds into Aurora account. Otherwise, they don't have them in Trisolaris, unless there is a mirrored account for Trisolaris that actually maintains all the balances going forward.
But
Well, that sounds very complicated.
I mean, it's complicated, but it sounds a lot of complication is exposed to the developers this way, but it sounds to me that it should be possible. Of course, I think the approach you suggested it's great, but we cannot do it today, right? That's
I mean, you can. It's just can be a little bit.
It's just more expensive. Yeah.
I mean, I can by deploying new contracts. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and you can force it on developers to do it, so you don't need to.
Yeah. Okay, that's
and,
fair.
And it's like 0.008 near, I think. So like the minimum proxy contract.
I see. Yeah. So this will be basically like some sort of stateless contract that will only have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like I can push the burden onto our team to push this like proposal to have the modules and
the global storage.
Yeah, global.
Yeah, actually, what is the status of that discussion? Can you share the link?
We can. Well, there hasn't been active discussions recently. Yeah, we can maybe discuss it next time. So I mean, I can share some of the old discussions we've had. But yeah, I think we're kind of running out of time. Josh, do we want to wrap things up here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a couple minutes left. Michael did make a comment. I just wanted to make sure that you guys got it. It said that the current proposal can do it all in one transaction, just with multiple callbacks. And he thinks the flexibility of allowing it to split over multiple transactions is an advantage, because Aurora transactions can use a lot of gas. So being able to do the Aurora and near call separately could enable more complex use cases. Didn't know if anybody has a comment on that.
I mean, I think like developers can always decide to split into two transactions. I just like that's not like setting that as prerequisite is kind of limiting. But if developers want, you can always have like 2, 3, 5 cover. You can always kind of record what you want to do and then call the recorded stuff to be executed.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, we got like 3 minutes left. So yeah, if anybody has any final comments or questions. Oh, it looks like I have one. When's Viper on Aurora? That's more interesting than cross contract calls on Aurora near. Matthias is asking.
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
When's Viper Aurora?
Viper, is that but it's the language, right? It's already supported because Aurora supports EVM, it's not about Solidity, it's everything that compiles to EVM. So if I understand correct, Viper is just another language, right? So you can compile it to EVM bytecode and you can deploy it in Aurora. Should be working. I would expect, if I'm not missing something.
Cool. Awesome. Right on. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have. Yeah, thanks so much, Marcelo and Bowen and Ilya and Evgeny and all the people that have joined the discussion. It's been very, very awesome. And yeah, definitely a lot of food for thought here. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We will be posting this recording in a couple, hopefully tomorrow or the next day. So keep an eye out for it on YouTube. And also we'll post the links to the discussions that we're having both on the governance forum. And I believe, yeah, there's the Aurora post that we can add to that video call as well for your Aurora enhancement proposal or improvement proposal, sorry, the AIP. But yeah, feel free to join again next month, same time, the second Thursday of the month. And yeah, thanks again. We'll see you next time.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.